What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, the history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, November 7th, 2018, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Powwow on a Friday. And obviously, it's the day after the midterms. And, a lot of things happened during the midterms. We're still getting a lot of the information coming on in. But I think in overall summary, we can say that the blue wave did not happen. The Republicans not only kept the Senate, they gained seats. All of the celebrity Democrat candidates basically, well, they fizzled. They failed. The Democrats did take control of the House, but only by a narrow majority. Now, you need to understand, historically, the average president will lose 37 seats in the House in his first midterm. Obama lost 63, Clinton lost 53, Trump lost 26. So actually, it came out pretty good in terms of the historical numbers, but they advanced in the Senate by 5 seats. That is absolutely historic. Now, here's the part that is really bothering me. We are getting reports from all over the country about election fraud, cheating, outright cheating. And everybody seems to be like shrugging their shoulders and saying, well, yeah, okay, yeah, elections get stolen. No, that's not the way it's supposed to be here. And don't forget, yesterday, Project Veritas came on out with a video down in Texas where a Texas election official, somebody who's supposed to be in charge of the process and keeping an eye on it, came on out and said, yeah, there are tons of non-citizens voting. And they got him on tape basically saying, yeah, bring them on in. They can vote, sure, they can all vote. And by the way, it didn't really work in Texas. But the idea that the election officials are taking part in the fraud should be alarming to everybody. And now, of course, we understand when Donald Trump did set up his election integrity commission, they went out to the state election commissions to try and get some information, and they got stonewalled by all of them. They're all basically controlled by the Democrats. They're all engaged in massive, massive fraud. Apparently, a poll worker over in Ohio discovered her neighbor's name still listed on the active voter list at her precinct. The only problem being that the neighbor had died 14 years ago. Now, the Nonpartisan Election Protection Hotline received more than 30,000 calls yesterday, according to the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law, which operates this hotline. And that number is the highest it has ever received during a midterm election in the 18 years it has monitored election day issues. During the 2014 midterm, they received just 17,000 calls. They got 30,000 yesterday. Now, apparently, last week, civil rights groups sued to keep tens of thousands of mostly African-American voters from having their votes restricted because the names on their IDs do not precisely match the voting rolls, including middle names and hyphens. Now, remember, those voting rolls are a legal document. And whatever your legal name is, and it's usually the one that's on your driver's license, that's what you have to put on down. You can't change it. Not too long ago, just to give you an illustration of how nitpicky this can be, Claire and I were going through the process of setting up the documents that you are supposed to have to be ready for the end of your life, and they all have to be notarized. And Claire had put down a different name on the documents than the one that was on her driver's license. And as a result, we had to redo all the documents before they could be notarized. So you do need to make sure the names absolutely match what is defined as your legal name. Now, apparently, we're getting reports from all over the United States. There were long lines, malfunctioning machines. Voters reported waiting up to 3 hours to vote, with the biggest problems in Georgia and New York. And yes, it was predominantly Republican districts that seemed to be having all of these kind of problems here. In Florida and California, voters assigned to polling stations inside gated communities were saying it took them up to an hour just to get past the security gates. More malfunctioning voting machines in Florida, Georgia, Massachusetts, Michigan, Missouri, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Virginia. Voters who went to the polling place in Chandler, Arizona, found the doors locked and a legal notice saying the building had been closed overnight for failure to pay rent. Over in Maricopa County, Arizona, people trying to vote hit several different problems during the day. For at least 20 minutes before noon, the entire computer system for the county stopped working, and printers were also down at polling places for several hours. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network. Our election system is a mess, and nobody seems to care. Everybody seems to think this is okay. More reports of problems printing ballots. These systems do not work, or they're being interfered with is more likely the situation here. This is infuriating here. Voters at regional centers were being turned away or enduring long waits after printers that produce the ballots tailored to their home precincts malfunctioned. Voters from Deer Valley to Phoenix were told they would likely experience long lines due to printer problems, according to the Arizona Republic. At least one polling site in Phoenix admitted it had run out of ballots in the morning, apologized for the inconvenience, and suggested voters come back later. They did about 25 minutes of voting. That was it, until they said they couldn't print anything. Out in California, Common Cause said its volunteers received 2,000 calls to its voting hotline, many with questions about changes to polling places. That's a very common trick to try and rig an election, is that you'll send out a notification to your voters of the opposing party that their polling place has been changed, and you send them off on a wild goose hunt. They can't find the polling place, they get fed up, and they go home without voting. Over in Bakersfield, literally, a driver crashed into a polling place at an elementary school, leading the police to lock down the polling place so nobody could vote. In North Hollywood, where Claire and I used to live, in Canoga Park, a jammed ballot box and a broken voting machine led to problems. At the Los Angeles County Registrar's office in Norwalk, hundreds lined up for more than 2 hours to iron out registration issues. Over in Florida, in Sarasota County, early voters were told to come back later because the ballots were not available. Apparently, at Annistown Elementary School in Snellville, Georgia, in Gwinnett County, voters reported standing in line for hours amid problems with the voting machines. Complaints also came in about how voter identification laws were being applied in Georgia, home to a hotly contested governor's race between Democrat Stacey Abrams and Republican Brian Kemp. In Fulton County, Georgia, other problems, including at a recreation center that received fewer than half the number of voting machines it was supposed to get. In a voting precinct at a senior living complex in Atlanta, voters waited in the rain for long lines that stretched around the building. Confused workers turned voters away. Over in Idaho, a sign discouraging college students from voting was spotted at a polling place in Rexburg, Idaho on Tuesday morning. And of course, we were reporting yesterday about that sign that was put up inside a polling place, "Vote Straight Democratic," which is electioneering inside the polling place. It is illegal. Now, the sign was taken down later in the day, but the damage was already done. Over in South Carolina, voters were alerting officials that voting machines were selecting the opposite candidates they were trying to choose. This is being reported in The Hill. And according to a local CBS affiliate, several voters complained that the choices in several contests, including the governor's race, were being changed to the opposite of what they selected. Now, some voters noticed the changes when they reviewed the electronic voting machine's confirmation page before actually submitting their ballot. One said she tried several times to make choices and selections she preferred, but the machine would not accept her ballots as cast, so the election workers moved her to a different machine. Nobody knows if the machine that was switching votes was taken offline. And it's not clear how many voters simply punched the buttons on the electronic machine and, trusting the electronic machine, simply submitted their ballots without looking. Yesterday, we were reporting on how in North Carolina, some polling places said the electronic machines would not take the paper ballots. They blamed it on high levels of humidity. So the ballots were stored in these emergency bins to be tabulated later, and nobody knows if they were tabulated or not. It's just a complete mess here. So there are all these election controversies here, and candidate Kemp announced election officials had opened an investigation into the state Democratic Party for allegedly attempting to hack voter registration rolls. The Secretary of State's office has also alerted the FBI and Homeland Security. Now, apparently, Georgia Democrats went to court last week over the state's exact match law, which requires your voter ID to match voting records on file exactly. About 50,000 people had been identified under the system as potential illegal voters. And the judge basically ordered them to be allowed to cast ballots. So, over in Houston, Texas, long lines at several polling places around the state, longer than normal for many people to cast ballots. Problems with the barcode readers and other balloting technology. One person tried to cast her ballot, but a mistake by poll workers made it impossible. This voter handed her driver's license to poll workers to get checked in. They printed out a barcode, which when scanned would produce an access code she could use to cast her ballot. But the barcode would not scan. So, not to worry, they gave her a provisional ballot. The system is a mess. And I'm sorry, but Donald Trump is to blame for this. He's had 2 years to clean up this system. And he dropped the ball. And as far as I'm concerned, Donald Trump is the reason the Republicans lost control of the House of Representatives. And Trump is going to be paying for it for the next 2 years. He's going to be paying for it the next 2 years. I mean, the Democrats, they're already out there. They're celebrating. They're getting ready. Nancy Pelosi is convinced she's going to be the Speaker of the House again. And she's out there saying, we're gonna be filing subpoenas and investigations nonstop at the White House, and we're going to impeach. We're going to impeach. Now, they can't remove. They don't have the votes in the Senate, but they're going to impeach him just so they can say he's been impeached. Now, I don't know what they think they're going to impeach him for. Mueller's investigation has found absolutely nothing after close to 2 years and millions of dollars. All right, we're going to take a phone call now from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Bad news, good news, and bad news. The bad news is they lost 34 seats, the Republicans. The good news, Sessions is out. Rosenstein might be going out, too. And
we'll
the bad
see.
news
I mean, he's headed for a meeting at the White House right now. I mean, I can't imagine that Trump would ask him to take over for Sessions. But I don't know. Trump right now, he's unpredictable. He's really unpredictable right now.
Well, you want to know what the really bad news is?
What's the really bad news?
The Trump administration has just sent to Congress that they're going to put more sanctions on Russia Because, you ready for this? Russia's in violation of the Chemical Weapons Act. Can you believe that?
Boy, talk about hypocrisy.
They destroyed all their chemical weapons.
The U.S. is in violation of the Chemical Weapons Treaty. They never got rid of the stockpiles.
We never destroyed one weapon. Russia destroyed their whole stockpile. And you know what the reason we gave? Because we didn't have the money.
Yeah.
Didn't Trump just say we have all the money we can ever hope for? The last couple of weeks ago? It's all lies, Mike.
We're going to be in a major war by the end of the year. You know, Claire and I, we're not even bothering putting up a Christmas tree because it might get nuked.
It's just a joke, Mike. And all this, you know, sure there was cheating going on.
Laughing.
You know. But I mean, Trump, he is the reason that he had the Mike, I voted for him. You know, we had the opportunity. We had it. We thought we had this guy who was on our side.
Yep.
It just seems like we've been duped.
He's a weak leader. Every time he's turned out to be a weak leader. He's susceptible to flattery. He's easy to manipulate. He's a failure as a president. I'm sorry. He's great at getting up on the stage and rallying the voters. He demonstrated that again during the run-up to the midterms. But as a leader, he's actually turning out to be very weak. And I hate to
say, Mike, but you can rally a bunch of sheep, and you'll have sheep follow anybody, the ones that want to follow because they believe. But I'm sorry, you can't believe in this dude anymore. He takes 2 steps forward, or 2 steps back, a couple steps forward, and 20 steps back. You know? I mean, he spent more time on Twitter. He couldn't do any research on Zero Hedge.
He couldn't do any research at whatreallyhappened.com. I mean, really.
That too.
I mean, come on, people. Really. Okay?
All right, Mike, have a good show. That's all I want to say. Yeah, man, it's just I just saw Larry King on RT the other day, and he says America's in trouble. Yeah. And ain't that the truth? Have a good show, Mike.
It is in trouble. Thank you for the call. We're going to switch over to Art off the grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
You know, this whole thing's a joke, don't you?
Yeah.
And the joke is on us.
Well, we're not laughing.
I sat up late. I'm not either. I sat up, I bet you till 11 o'clock last night. I just had to go to bed. But I followed this. I mean, I sat in the chat rooms all night long, posting notices of what was happening. And by the time it's all said and done, I'm looking at who won. And I'm thinking, we got people like, what's her name? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She wins.
Yes.
And all these other socialists, they win. And people just like, and then we think about people from New England, from New York and New Hampshire and Vermont. They're moving down here, down south, to my neighborhood. There's North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. And they're leaving because they can't stand the policies like high taxes and all this other crap. But they come down here and they bring the ideology and elect the very same kind of people who are responsible for the policies that they're trying to escape. These idiots just don't get it. And so I'm looking at all of these socialists who have won, and I'm thinking, you know what? The Senate is really going to take a turn here. We are going to see the next 2 years of absolute gridlock, and I really hate making predictions because generally my predictions come true.
Yeah.
But here's what I see is going to happen, Mike. We're going to have 2 years of absolute gridlock.
Yes.
And people are going to be, what the hell did we just do to ourselves? And they're going to flip, and nobody's going to know which way is up, which way is down. They're not going to know black from white or yellow from green. And they're going to flip this entire system over until we see nothing but absolute destruction to what used to be the greatest country in the world. We are very quickly becoming a third world banana republic.
Oh, we're definitely there. Anyway, listen, Art, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We're going to be right back with more phone calls after these few words. We're going to go right back to the phone lines to Layla in Ontario. Aloha, Layla. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I'm just watching as they're rearranging the chairs on the Titanic, as the old cliche goes. Remember what the Founding Fathers warned us: vigilance, vigilance, vigilance. I mean, this has been happening incrementally, and yet we've all, I mean, too many people have ignored the obvious. There's something such as looking around, assessing logically, and analyzing what is happening, and then using deductive and consequential reasoning that, had that been in play, perverse. And that is where the problem is. The indulgence in compassion has actually allowed us to permit. Well, when I was working in newsrooms and the general managers or the tops of the TV station would complain about reporters getting uppity, they would always say the animals or the monkeys are running the zoo, and such is the case. We handed over the keys of the zoo over to the most feeble and the most incapable. In Detroit, we now have a Palestinian Muslim woman, or in Michigan. That is not a good sign. I know my first suggestion that we have to be very cautious, and those who appear to be victims are not always pure and innocent. They are in many ways the ones who perpetuate their own victimhood.
Yeah.
But anyway, we are in trouble. There's no doubt, and Trump alone is not to blame. I mean, the very fact that we had such poor choices is a reflection of the nature of what has happened in our society, not only in the U.S., but in Canada, too. Look what our choices are.
Yeah.
We had either the spoiled brat who knew nothing, and if anyone, I followed his history, and he's really being run. I mean, it's Ralph Goodale in Canada, who that pathetic old fart who's actually running the show, and they put up a lot of funny faces in order to show their diversity and the tolerance, the obscenity of pride parades, and politicians and moral leaders engaging in them in order to be seen as accepting. And that has progressed incrementally from accepting homosexuality, which occurred naturally in some people, to it becoming a recreational activity. Sexual gluttony is what it was. And we have gone from that and every other. We're a pagan society. We've reverted way back to before. So I'm kind of in the position where, thank God I'm 73. I just regret, unfortunately, I may be living long enough to see the worst yet to come. I'm not so sure we're going to have 2 years of gridlock in the U.S. I don't think it's going to be simply battles in the House, in the Congress, or the Senate. I think it's going to be a lot more tangible and much closer to home. And it is going to be little firefights all over the place. We've already got basically an undeclared civil war anyway in the U.S. and very much in Canada as well. The pity is the rational people, the white patriarchal men who used to look after our society while taking care of themselves, they also took care of us. They are dead. Those men are gone. And these succeeding generation...
Not all of us. Not all of us. And...
not all of us? Yeah.
The situation I'm looking at is that even though the Democrats succeeded in capturing the House of Representatives, apparently with massive election fraud, they didn't win the knockdown victory they were hoping for. So, yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more incivility in the streets of America.
That's what's so frightening. And my hopes that things would settle down under Trump and I could return to the country that I actually love, that is not going to happen. I guess I will just play it safe. It's terrible where I am. It's utterly unpalatable. Municipal governments, provincial governments, I mean, are corrupt, bloated, overpaid, nepotism rules. So it's bad here, but we're only going to be seeing the fringes, the fringe effect of what will be moving outward from the U.S. It really breaks my heart, but I've been expecting this. I'm not entirely surprised. I'm terribly disappointed because I had been hoping for better. It's hard to know what to say or what to do. Do we surrender?
No, I have no intentions of surrendering. The part that angers me, are all these reports of voting irregularities, meaning fraud, all across the country. The corporate media refuses to touch it. And by and large, most people are sort of treating it like, well, this is just kind of the way these things get done in the U.S. Trump dropped the ball. The reason the Republicans lost the House of Representatives is Donald Trump dropped the ball on election integrity. Anyway, Layla, we got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back with more phone calls. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones here to Jim in Chicago. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. What happened last night did not really surprise me because I thought the Democrats overplayed their hand a long time ago, and I knew that what they were expecting was not going to come true. But unfortunately, the biggest losers last night are the American people. For the next 2 years, absolutely nothing's going to happen. There's going to be gridlock. There's going to be fighting. Everything's going to be upside down. And unfortunately, the average American citizens like myself, you, and others are going to be neglected. Yes. And that's the sad state of affairs right now.
Yeah, for the next 2 years, the Democrats are going to be focused on destroying Trump's image for 2020 and making him unelectable. And they're going to try and impeach him. They can't remove him from office. It's going to be about as effective as Bill Clinton's impeachment. But they're going to campaign on that in 2020. Donald Trump was impeached. How could you possibly vote for him? What was he impeached for? For dragging his fingernails across the blackboard and making us all cringe. But still, he was impeached. And yeah, that's it. I mean, our entire federal government has now become obsessed with the next campaign, the next campaign, the next campaign. And that's why nothing is actually getting done in this country. Yesterday, we were talking about how we literally have the natural gas infrastructure in this country is so deteriorated, it's starting to blow up all across the country. These are actual pipe bombs, real pipe bombs with real explosions, not like those phony bombs, what's his name was mailing out to the Democrats that got all the media attention. We're talking about gas pipelines exploding, killing people, destroying buildings. Not getting coverage in the corporate media. You're not supposed to know what terrible condition this country is in because the government is too busy campaigning for the next election to actually run the place.
I would agree with that. And like you stated, the next 2 years are going to be just as bad, if not worse. But this is my question. What does the average person, like myself, you, and others do during this time period?
Well, the biggest problem we have right now is we have been disenfranchised. And as I said at the top of the show, we are getting reports from all over the country of voting problems, which the media likes to call irregularities, while assuring us that it didn't change the outcome. It couldn't possibly have changed the outcome, which is an unsupportable statement. Because if you're seeing indications of voting fraud, you can't assume you found it all. And frankly, if you look at the Democratic victories against the earlier polling numbers, something definitely happened. And we know the Democrats like to cheat. Most of these voting problems where people couldn't vote were happening in these GOP-heavy districts. We have got to basically lobby the White House, lobby Donald Trump, and say, look, you promised us an honest voting system, and you failed. You dropped the ball, and you lost the House of Representatives because of it. So what are you going to do in the next 2 years?
Well, Michael, tell me this now. He had a plan. Why did he change his mind? Was he forced to change his mind, or he knew that this was going to cause more of a conflict where he doesn't care, or he figures, as long as I have the Republicans on my side, everything is going to be fine? I don't understand the guy's thinking.
I don't understand the guy's thinking either, other than that he is apparently a very weak leader. He's easy to manipulate. He's known to be very susceptible to flattery. So somebody comes up, says you're doing a really great job, but look, over here on the Voting Integrity Commission, you ought to just shut that down. Let the Department of Homeland Security take it over. They'll do a really good job of cracking down on voter fraud, which, by the way, yesterday's election proved the Department of Homeland Security completely and utterly failed to do that.
Right. Well, Michael, I'm going to let you go. You take care. Oh, by the way, what's the story with the caravans? Has anyone talked about that?
As far as I know, it's still on the way up here, and it's still got all these people from all over the world in it, including the nations that Trump has blacklisted, and they're just going to be allowed to apparently walk into this country. I mean, the Army's putting up the barbed wire, but I don't know that they have 2,000 miles of that barbed wire to put up.
Right. Okay, Michael, I'm going to let you go. You take care.
Okay, thanks an awful lot. Right. Let's go to George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, yeehaw, Beto is not in the U.S. Senate, so that's a good thing. But, you know, another suspicious thing, I was listening to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee have a press conference to try to get the polls open for an extra hour. Well, the thing is, there wasn't a problem with turnout or any voting irregularities. I just think that they found out she was in trouble, and she just needed an extra hour for the polls open just to stuff that ballot box.
Yeah, we see a lot of that. We see a lot of that. And, you know, my opinion is simply this. When we talk about having an honest election system, the polls have to be open when they say they're going to be open. They're going to close when they say they're going to close. And if Americans want to vote, they have to get there when the polls are open. And this idea of going to a judge and ordering them to stay open later, you're right. It's an invitation to fraud. It's an invitation to electioneering, of trying to get more people to show up, to stuff that ballot box. I mean, our election system's a joke. It's a national disgrace.
Well, Harris County, where Houston is, took a sweep. That means it went from, for any Republican or Libertarian that held office that was up for re-election that were very popular, all of a sudden it just went all Democrat, even judges. And everybody's suspicious of that. And that's the problem. I mean, it's more like, got to get rid. And the thing is, I asked an election official, I said, why can't we go back to paper ballots? I said, and you know what he said? It's too time-consuming and costly for paper ballots. I said, I made paper ballots for my class election on a ditto machine.
Yeah.
You can have election. You know what I mean, Mike? I mean, it's not that complicated to have paper ballots.
No, it isn't. It isn't. And again, go to whatreallyhappened.com, go to the upper left of the main page, and right underneath my, yes, it's outdated photograph, there's an article, How to Have Honest Elections. And it's not expensive, but it makes the elections fully transparent. It crowdsources the actual counting of the election so that there's none of this backroom chicanery. And I'm not saying it's absolutely foolproof, but it's going to make election fraud very difficult to achieve and almost impossible to conceal, as opposed to our current system, which is clearly designed to facilitate election fraud and conceal it from the public view.
Well, personally, for me, it's more like not only like contact the White House, but also the House of Representatives, because they're in charge of judging the qualification and certification of elections. And I would, for people, I mean, I've been calling, our Secretary of State, do not certify any congressional elections because there's massive evidence of voter fraud. And I wouldn't mind if, make the elections of the House of Representatives null and void and do it all over again with paper ballots and throw those voting machines in the Gulf of Mexico to be an artificial reef.
I think it's a perfect use for them. They are a little toxic, unfortunately, but yeah, those electronic machines. I mean, go to blackboxvoting.org, look at what Bev Harris has been doing over there, look at that documentary, Hacking Democracy, look at the one we dug up yesterday from 2005, The Invisible Ballots. This system is set up to manipulate elections. And it's like Stalin said, all people have to think is that there was an election, and it doesn't matter how they voted. All that matters is who is counting the vote. They decide everything, and that's where we are right now. We have a Stalin-esque election system, and it needs to go away. That is our first step to the American people regaining our franchise in the United States of America.
Well, here's my prediction. If the Democrats have the House for 2 years, here's my prediction. I hope there's a few freshman congressmen or some decent ones that still have a little humanity and intellect will sit there and say, I don't want Maxine Waters and Schiff and Nancy Pelosi, these crazy batheads, running the party, because I will tell you one thing, they will run the party further into the ground. Because, with these subpoenas and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And for these, and I hope they start fighting among each other, And I just hope, if they want to repeal Obamacare, that there be a few brave enough to cross over and, to repeal Obamacare, knowing that this law is a ball and chain around their ankle.
Well, I don't think it's going to happen because, what Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters and the other Democratic power holders are going to do is come to those incoming freshmen and say, look, the people did not vote you into that seat. We rigged the election to put you there, so you owe us and you will do what we tell you to do. And that's probably exactly what's going to happen. People who stand up on principle, they're one-term members of Congress.
Well, I'd rather them be that, But it's just like I just hope there's so much, because these people are crazy. It's like Maxine Waters was saying she's gonna throw a wrecking ball to the economy and send subpoenas to the White House like crazy.
Yep.
It's like they're gonna make them look bad, and I don't really think. I just hope there's a few with some testosterone. And not actually soy boys, that they'll actually stand up to him and say, no, this is wrong.
Never going to happen.
Anyway, Mike, I'll let you go.
Never going to happen. The Democratic leadership, when they were recruiting candidates to run for these seats, they vet them and make sure that they're going to be obedient little puppets. I mean, there are literally consulting companies inside the Beltway. All they do is write scorecards on members of Congress, especially the first-time members of Congress. Will they do what their corporate masters say or not? Because it's one thing when you're running for your first term in Congress and you can fundraise and build support in your home district. But once you're there in Washington, D.C., and you can't spend as much time in your home district, you become dependent on corporate funding for your next campaign. And so you're going to do what the corporations are going to tell you to do. All right. Thank you for the call, George. We're going to switch over here to Neil in California. Neil, thank you very much for waiting so patiently. And what is on your mind?
Michael, aloha to you and Claire in the United States of America. I'd love to say again to the Palestinian woman, I wish her the best of luck. But I disagree with her completely. I agree with you completely. There are still men like us left. I don't overpower or dominate or control my wife, my woman, my love. I support and I back her up. I'm there for whatever she wants. Now, what I wanted to call in about is we're playing a game of chess. We're playing a fucking excuse my language.
Yeah,
really
please watch your language here because you can get our affiliates into trouble with the FCC because even though the United States government is dropping white-hot flaming death on innocent people in multiple countries who've done no wrong to us, we're not allowed to say bad words on the radio to prove that we are a just and moral people.
No, and after just saying what I did say, I do apologize for saying that. Even though I read this morning that Beto in Texas, he dropped that in his supposed concession speech.
Yes, he did.
Really?
Yes.
So we're playing a game of chess. We're playing a game of poker. I wanna portray myself as being slightly stupid. I love hearing you, other radio shows, other call-ins, other people going, I'm totally disappointed with this man. I voted for him. I wanted what he's saying, and I knew it would be really difficult to even happen. Now, all of that election fraud you're talking about now, he overcame that, and that's what the election fraud was set up to not allow happen.
Yeah.
So they only got, 3 seats to get the side of the house on theirs, and I'm hearing, we're the next day, barely a lot of counts are still not counted.
Yeah.
You just said, 500,000 votes in wherever, not counted. How much of this is still happening? So, like I said, let the Mueller investigation go on. Let him pry into every little nook and cranny he possibly can, and he'll eventually have to tell everybody what he found. It's like the same way with the election fraud. He talked about that before he got elected. He got elected while talking about election fraud. He said, I want to clean up election fraud. But like you said, nothing has happened. Nothing has changed.
Yep.
He's letting it all be shown on television. You're talking about it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 20 radio shows are talking about it right now. It's on mainstream media as being discounted or being talked about. He's literally shining the light on everything and handing them their own news. There's a lot of things. I'm waving the flag right now. There's a lot of things I disagree with, but the reason why I voted for him is what he's actually doing is what I voted for.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying.
Everyone.
I hear what you're saying, but corporate media is treating the issue of election fraud. I mean, they did it back in 2016 when Trump first brought it up, that there were issues with the election system, and they were out there saying, no, it's impossible to rig America's elections. Our elections are totally honest and transparent. No, they're not. 2016 proved it. 2018 has proved it. 2020 is going to prove it unless there are significant changes. From my point of view, Trump had an opportunity to clean this up, and he pulled the plug. He shut down his commission on election integrity because the state commissions didn't want to cooperate. Trump is the president. He does have certain authorities that he can use. He could have used an executive order to say the state election commissions will cooperate with the election integrity commission, and anybody who doesn't, well, they can hand in their resignation. And he dropped the ball. As far as I'm concerned, he dropped the ball. Anyway, Neil, gotta let you go. Gotta take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Let's go back to the phones to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? Mike, actually, I'm very encouraged about, first of all, I don't think the House really can do all that much. They don't really have real teeth, not like the Justice Department. And what he did today by firing Sessions, now he's got to fire Rosenstein also, is a good first step. Because first of all, now he can be assured, since we got a lot more Republicans and looks like more decent Republicans that are now in the Senate, that he could get somebody like maybe a Larry Klayman of Judicial Watch, of Freedom Watch, or Tom Fenton of Judicial Watch, maybe confirmed as Attorney General. And once that happens, they can turn this whole investigation over and make Mueller the target, as he should be the target of the investigation, rather than the guy doing the investigating. This thing could be completely turned over, and the Justice Department, like I said, has teeth, especially with Trump behind it. And it doesn't matter what fat slob like that guy who's going to... What's that fat slob there from New York who's going to take over now in as the Judicial Committee or whatever it is, investigating? That guy, whatever the case is.
Yeah. It's
not going to be up to them. It can be up to the Justice Department. They can do a real investigation. They can dig this whole thing up, find out about what the deep state really did, that all this Russian nonsense that's been done is to cover up the crimes of the FBI, the CIA, and the Obama and his cronies. That's all it is. And on top of that, it endangers the whole. It not only endangers the country, it endangers the whole world because it puts us. It causes even more friction between the U.S. and Russia, and puts us closer to nuclear war. So I mean, these are criminals, and they have to be brought to justice. And I'm more confident. Now, again, it depends on who he puts in there as Attorney General. He's got to get rid of Rosenstein too. I don't know who this temporary guy is.
Well, apparently, Rod Rosenstein has ended his White House meeting. They just showed him getting into his car or being put into his car. He's got a driver and driving away, but they're not reporting that he has been let go. And so,
I didn't know he was a meeting.
Yeah, it was a meeting with Trump.
If Trump keeps this clown again, if he doesn't get rid of him, then Trump is, he's his own worst enemy.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. There's no way Rosenstein should be the guy is himself involved in a lot of these crimes. He has to be also the target of investigation. And like I said, Mueller is dirty. He's been dirty at least since the 1980s. When I told you the other day that he was, for all intents and purposes, Whitey Bulger's consigliere, I'm not kidding you.
No, I wasn't making this up.
For all intents and purposes, Bulger ran the FBI office in Boston. The FBI is one of the most crooked agencies this country's ever had since it's founded by the cross-dresser in the early 1900s.
No, the Boston FBI threw 4 innocent men into prison to protect Whitey Bulger, and Mueller was up to his neck in all of that. Anyway, listen, thank you for the phone call, Mark. We got to let you go. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with hour number 2 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And before we go any further, I do have an announcement to make about hour number 3. Hour number 3 is going to be a replay from an earlier show. I have to take Claire to the doctors. We're finally going to get the full results from the MRI on her back injury, which, I mean, if you think about it, this is November. She injured her back all the way back in January, and it's just taken this long for the medical industrial complex to get caught up this far. Now, we already do know that her vertebra that was broken has fused, and we'll get the other fine detail about what she can and cannot do this afternoon. So I have to take the 3rd hour of the show off, and there will be a repeat, and I'm going to ask you to sit through that repeat so that you are here for John Stedmiller's show, because I'm sure he's going to have a lot of stuff to add about what's going on. Okay, Fox News is reporting that Trump has come out with an announcement saying there are going to be some more shakeups at the White House and within the administration. And as I mentioned before, the station identification, Rod Rosenstein has now ended his meeting at the White House and left, but they're not saying what the meeting was about. They are not saying that he has been let go. So I don't know what's going on, but if he has not been fired, then yeah, Trump has been compromised. Okay, let's take a phone call from James in Charlotte. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, hello, Mike. Big surprise for you. I actually have some optimistic news, some good news that here in North Carolina, we voted in Proposition 4, which was the constitutional amendment for a voter photo ID requirement.
Good.
And, yeah, that I was looking at some states, this was incidentally a constitutional amendment, and, I'm not sure that it will be, but I really almost hope that it'll be challenged in court by some of the various groups, that are obviously opposed to it. But it was put on the ballot by the legislature. It was one of 2 ways that the Constitution can be amended. It was voted by a 60% majority in the legislature, and the Democrats fought it tooth and nail.
Oh, of course.
But fortunately, we did have a heavy majority of Republicans in the legislature. It did get it put on the ballot.
Well, that's definitely good news, and that's something else that Trump needs to do in the next 2 years, is work for a national voter ID requirement. Because, again, you've got that Project Veritas video down in Texas where a voting official who should know better is out there saying, sure, we got tons of non-citizens voting, bring them on in, we'll get them to vote. And, Trump is paying the price for his inactivity on these issues. He lost the House of Representatives, and he's going to have a gridlocked Congress for the next 2 years. And the House of Representatives, they're going to be forming up all these committees that are going to be executing lawfare against the White House with endless subpoenas and requests for information, and they're going to be digging for any dirt they can find. And they're talking impeachment, not just of Trump, but of Brett Kavanaugh. They don't have grounds to impeach. Yeah. You can't impeach somebody just because you don't like them. There has to be a high crime and misdemeanor, and Mueller's found nothing. And by the way, speaking of which, we're just now getting word, the upshot of Rod Rosenstein's meeting at the White House is he is no longer overseeing the Mueller probe. He has been taken off of it. He still has his job, which I don't agree with, but he's definitely no longer in charge of that probe.
Well, he put his acting attorney general in charge?
Yeah, the acting attorney general, who is, let's see, I got it scrolling down here.
I've heard his name, but I don't recall it.
Yeah, let's see. Okay, Matthew Whitaker. And he's a lawyer, Republican politician. He's former chief of staff to Sessions, and he's now the acting director of the Department of Justice. And I guess he's now in charge of the Mueller probe because Rod Rosenstein is off of that now.
Yeah, well, I guess now that Sessions gone, he can go and basically take naps permanently. That's all he's been doing, I think.
No, he's been working very hard to try and keep the lid on stuff the Department of Justice should be looking at. I mean, when Sessions, and let's be honest, he didn't resign, he was fired. White House Chief of Staff Kelly asked him for a letter of resignation, and Sessions basically turned it over. That really amounts to being fired. They're trying to make it look polite. And Sessions apparently wrote out a letter of resignation with his list of accomplishments, which must have been a very, very short list because Hillary Clinton is still not in jail. They still have not investigated whether she was selling U.S. secrets using her email server. They still not have investigated the Uranium One deal. They didn't investigate the Clinton Foundation. I think Jeff Sessions' list of accomplishments could be written on a Post-it note.
Yeah, with room left over. Well, yeah, thanks a lot.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Okay, right now, speaking of the Mueller investigation, voters nationwide, according to NBC News, they're tired of the Mueller investigation. More voters disapprove of continuing the investigation than they approve. And this is according to NBC News, which probably was trying to bias the poll, and they still couldn't come up with the numbers that they wanted. And Americans are realizing this is a witch hunt against Donald Trump led by 17 angry Democrats who still have not gotten over 2016 here. Now, as I mentioned before, Nancy Pelosi is already out there. She's gunning for that speakership. She's convinced she's going to get it. there may be a surprise upset, but we'll see what happens there. And she's there. The House of Representatives, they're going to be Trump's adversaries. They're going to go after him. They're going to be forming all these committees. They're going to be issuing subpoenas and just basically bury the White House in requests for documentation. And Donald Trump is coming back saying, you know, two can play that game because he still has the Senate. The Senate gained 5 seats for Republicans. And Trump is saying, yeah, we can start all the probes from the Senate looking into things that the Democrats have been doing. And like I said, it's time to go after Hillary Clinton. You want to destroy the Democrats' brand for 2020, you start looking at that email server. You start looking at Uranium One. You start looking at the Clinton Foundation. I don't understand why Trump is tiptoeing. Anyway, back down in Texas, despite the massive illegals who were voting with the encouragement of that Texas voting official, Ted Cruz won his Senate seat back, and they're having a meltdown over Beto O'Rourke. And they're just out there screaming and crying, and oh my goodness, how could Beto lose? Well, because more people voted for the other guy here. Florida Senate race is heading into a recount. Apparently, it was close enough, less than 0.5%, which is the margin threshold that automatically triggers a recount under Florida law. Now, Rick Scott, as of the last count, was up about 35,000 votes over Democratic incumbent Senator Bill Nelson. The last word I heard is that he may have actually wound up losing after all. But again, they're still recounting. A lot of these races are still being counted. You know, where's the advantage of the electronic machines? They were supposed to give us accurate, reliable results instantaneously, and they do not. For all that money. And by the way, there's nothing in the Constitution that says we have to know the results of an election that very night. Obviously, when this country was first started and they were holding elections, it could be weeks before the outcome of the elections were known, especially at the national level. Now, Obama campaigned against Trump in Indiana, Florida, and Georgia, and the Democrats lost all those states. And by the way, Donald Trump is already out there saying that the Republicans who lost yesterday are the ones who tried to distance themselves from him. Over in Nevada, based on partial returns, the heavily Republican district in Nevada, in District 36, won against the Democrat Lysia Romanoff. And apparently Dennis Hof was the victor. He's the owner of a brothel, which is legal in Nevada. And he's also dead. He died during the campaign. And apparently the Nevada voters just didn't want a Democrat under any circumstances. So District 36 is now represented by a dead guy. And I know, yes, they'll appoint a replacement for him here. Over in Georgia, Democratic candidate Stacey Abrams has refused to concede the Georgia governor's race to Republican candidate Brian Kemp, saying it's too close to call and that there may have to be a runoff in December. And all these issues are basically reminding us our voting system is not accurate. It's not reliable. It's not trustworthy. Down in Florida, DeSantis wins the governor's race. Gillum has conceded. This was one of the most closely watched races of 2018. And Gillum was supposed to become the first black governor in Florida's history, and the voters said, no, we're going to go with Andrew Gillum. I'm sorry, we're going to go with DeSantis, rather. Now, getting on back to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez up in New York. And, of course, she was the big surprise during the primaries when she beat the incumbent. And she's, clearly Democratic. She calls herself a Democratic socialist. She's a hardline socialist. She doesn't like to use that word because she realizes it's poison with the voters. And she campaigned on making all kinds of promises Democrats like to make. We're going to give you free stuff. Couldn't explain how she was going to pay for any of it, but she still won. And she actually is poised to be a serious challenge to Nancy Pelosi as the new face of the Democratic Party. She may throw her hat in the ring to be the new Speaker of the House. Everybody likes her. I mean, she's personable. She's a good salesperson, no question. Over in Michigan, they voted to pass legal recreational marijuana. And over on The Late Show, host Stephen Colbert was just ecstatic on the Democrats retaking control of the House. Oh, they can open investigations into the president. There have been investigations into the president up the yin-yang for 2 years now. They have found absolutely nothing. And as far as what happened down in Texas, Stephen Colbert actually said that simply by not being Ted Cruz, Beto is still a winner. No, Stephen, he's not. He lost. Let's just say what actually happened. He lost the election, despite the massive amounts of non-citizens voting as documented by Project Veritas. Alrighty, the FBI has now finished its investigation into Michael Flynn, the former National Security Advisor. They were looking into phone calls that were intercepted between Flynn and the Russian ambassador to the U.S., and FBI is admitting they found no evidence of wrongdoing. Now, this was part of the wider probe into Russia's interference in the presidential election of 2016 and hacking of the Democratic National Committee, which we all know wasn't a hack, it was a leak. That has been proven by the metadata on the files that were given to WikiLeaks. I think Trump ought to offer Michael Flynn his job back, or some kind of a job at the same level. This man has been seriously, seriously wronged. And I think Trump, if he's actually going to regain control of the Department of Justice, they need to look into that that leak of the Democratic National Committee and come on out and say it was an internal leak. It was not a Russian hack. It was an internal leak, probably by Seth Rich, because the leaks stopped when he got murdered. Now, over the weekend, the Senate Judiciary Committee released a 414-page report detailing the allegations made against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh during the confirmation process. And the report found that all of the accusations failed to include any evidence or merit. But they do document that porn lawyer Michael Avenatti and his client Julie Swetnick criminally conspired to wreck Kavanaugh's nomination. Now, Swetnick has since come on out and said, yeah, she just made it all up. She wanted her 15 minutes of fame. These people should be prosecuted. NBC had a story that showed that Avenatti may have fabricated allegations by yet another declarant. He lied. These people need to go to jail. Anyway, as so many people have already commented on the phone lines, and it's all over the media, Earlier today, White House Chief of Staff Kelly asked Attorney General Jeff Sessions for a letter of resignation, which Jeff Sessions has basically turned in. He's expected to be out of his office by the end of the day, which actually should be right about now. And they're saying that he resigned to be polite. But yeah, he got fired by Trump. And Sessions' Chief of Staff, Matthew Whitaker, is now the acting Attorney General for the United States. We don't know if that's going to be permanent or not, but we'll see what he's going to do. He is a lawyer. He is a Republican. So he may be a little bit more willing to take the Department of Justice in a direction against some of these Democrats that were out there here. And certainly against all these former attorney generals who are all tangled up with HSBC drug money laundering and all these other crimes coming out of, well, Arkansas in the 1980s, the consulate in Benghazi, Hillary's email server. There's a big stink in there. I think I know what it is. I suspect espionage. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're just now getting word that Acting Attorney General Whitaker is now directly in charge of the Mueller witch hunt. And that is significant because apparently in August of 2017, Whitaker penned an op-ed for CNN saying that Mueller's investigation of Trump is going too far, in which he argued the special counsel was roving outside of his jurisdiction to investigate Trump-Russia collusion, which was true. The special counsel law says that a special counsel is supposed to get focus on one alleged crime, which a regular Department of Justice investigation has indicated there is evidence to support, none of which happened. Rosenstein simply ginned this thing up out of thin air. So this may be the beginning of the end of the Mueller investigation. Now, Representative Gerald Nadler is already out there saying, we have to have an investigation. We have to find out what was behind Trump's firing of Attorney General Jeff Sessions here, which is kind of weird because a year ago, he was out there tweeting that Jeff Sessions had to resign as Attorney General because he couldn't possibly lead the Department of Justice to promote trust and the rule of law, which was certainly true, and that's what happened. But Representative Nadler, I need to remind you of something. The president has the authority to basically fire anybody he wants, and he doesn't have to come up with a reason. And certainly, I think the case can be made that Sessions has utterly failed as an attorney general. If you look at all the obvious crimes that were out there for which there was plenty of evidence, like the Uranium One deal, and how he ignored all of that to focus all his efforts on this Russia-Trump collusion theory for which there is zero evidence. After nearly 2 years and millions of dollars, they found nothing. I would have fired him a long time ago. Alrighty, so now somebody earlier was asking about the Migrant Horde, and apparently Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen is basically reaffirming a claim that Middle Easterners are among those traveling in the Central American caravans currently making their way north in hopes of getting across the border and seeking asylum in the United States. So in an interview with Fox News, Nielsen said, we absolutely see people from the Middle East, from Southeast Asia, from other parts of the world. They are not just from Central America. Now remember, there are several nations that Trump has issued a ban on immigration from, which again, under Title VIII, he's got the authority to do that. So we'll see what's going to happen on that. As of last count, there are 4 separate caravans. I imagine, though, that as they get close to the U.S. border, they're going to split up and basically try and get across at multiple locations to get past the Border Patrol, the National Guard, and whatever military is still down there. But again, the Army is down there deploying razor wire, the really nasty coiled stuff, and we'll see what's going to happen. But again, you know, the Migrant Horde, they could like strip a house of some boards and throw those across the razor wire and get across that way. So we'll see here. All right, let's get on back here. Conflict zones. Let's talk about the conflict zones. There are so many. Story coming out of Al-Masdar News. The U.S. is going to step up their efforts to combat Iran in Syria and Iraq. So now they're trying to shift the blame because the U.S. isn't doing very well in Syria. The Iraqis want the Americans to leave. And it's not, of course, because the Americans are there and, you know, behaving badly. It's all the fault of Iran. How dare Iran militarily intervene in Syria and Iraq? Those are our playgrounds, saith the United States government. And, you know, it's our job to go around to these other countries and invade them and change their governments. And how dare Iran, let alone Russia, interfere with that? It's against the rules that we just made up. So they're building the rhetoric against Iran. Over in Yemen, British-backed Saudi bombing has destroyed Oxfam facilities in Yemen. Apparently, the Saudi government is using British intelligence to destroy British aid facilities in Yemen paid for by the British taxpayers. And this is like food supplies, hospitals, aid programs, all being destroyed. Now, the British aid is a vital lifeline. And Saudi Arabia, using British intelligence where all this stuff was located, has gone on in and destroyed it. We got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And One America News is now reporting that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein will offer his resignation within the next 48 hours. And maybe they're trying to space it out so it doesn't look like it's a purge, but that's exactly what's going on. And you need to remember Rod Rosenstein was the guy who suggested wearing a wire to meetings with Donald Trump to try and catch him saying something that would allow them to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove the president. So long, Rod, and don't let the door hit your butt on the way out here. Getting on back to the war zones here, and specifically to Yemen, the United Arab Emirates-backed forces, the Yemeni forces, have achieved a major advance in western Yemen after a fierce battle with the Houthis inside Hodeidah. And apparently they have succeeded in actually entering the city now. And led by the Yemeni Republican Guard, who is on the side of the Western powers wanting to impose a puppet government. These UAE forces broke through the Houthis' lines in southern Hodeidah, paving the way for their troops to enter the city for the first time. So it's definitely getting bad. Now, Donald Trump has come on out saying that he wants to create a Middle East strategic alliance, which they're calling MESA, which would be an Arab NATO-like alliance specifically to confront Iran. Trump is trying to get all the other nations in the Middle East to gang up on whooping Iran, and I don't know how far he is going to get with that. I'm sure that UAE and Saudi Arabia will come on board. Saudi Arabia has viewed Iran as a challenge to their regional political power. But the other nations around there, I don't see a lot of enthusiasm for that. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is allowing Iran to continue to export oil to their 8 largest customers, meaning these 8 customers were going to ignore the sanctions anyway, and so the U.S. has to make it look like it's their idea and with their permission. Qatar is providing temporary support to 50,000 impoverished Gaza families as mediators continue to try and create a truce between Hamas and Israel. This is coming from Agent France Press. Now, obviously, Israel wants Hamas to go. They want Gaza under the control of the Palestinian Authority, which is under the control of Israel. And, of course, everybody's pushing the deal of the century, which Israel's fully on board with, which would compel the Palestinians to surrender their internationally recognized right of return to the homes and villages taken from them during the creation of the State of Israel. And I don't think the Palestinians are going to go for that. I don't think Hamas is going to go for that. But it's nice for Qatar to step on in and try and ease the suffering of all those people. Over in the Western Pacific, the United States and Japan are apparently planning a military response to what they're describing as China's incursion of the disputed islands, in this case the Senkaku Islands. And they're saying China has incurred into these islands. No, they haven't. It's called the South China Sea for a reason, and at the end of World War II, I mean, Japan during World War II conquered these islands, drove the Chinese out. At the end of World War II, which Japan lost, the Cairo Convention gave these islands back to China, and this Cairo Convention was signed by all the victorious powers in World War II, including the United States. So they really aren't disputed, and China isn't incurring into these islands. They are their islands, and they're building them up, which China likes to do, and for that matter, so does Japan. Japan's really big on creating artificial islands. They do these monstrous landfills with all their trash, and they build things on them, like airports. So it's something that they do. But the U.S. and Japan are planning a military operation to basically take the islands back for Japan. They're going to replay World War II, which is going to be kind of interesting here. Okay. We all know about Khashoggi, and it was a huge deal. It turns out there's been another Saudi journalist, Turki bin Abdul Aziz Al Jasser, and apparently he died while being tortured in detention by Saudi Arabia. This is being reported in the New Khalij, but since he wasn't a U.S. resident writing for the Washington Post, who cares? It's just another journalist here. So apparently, Al Jasser was arrested and tortured because Saudi authorities claimed that he was running the Twitter account Kashkool, which disclosed human rights violations committed by the Saudi authorities and the royal family. So he was arrested apparently last March, and he's had a very rough time since then. Now, this next story ought to raise the hairs on the back of your neck. And the story is coming out of Global Research up in Canada. They do really good work. And Trump has made a statement basically saying that he welcomes the age of usable nuclear weapons. And what they talk about when they talk about usable nuclear weapons are these smaller tactical nukes, not the big multi-megaton city busters, but the little itty-bitty nuclear bombs that are used to take out, a military base or the center of a city. They're still nuclear weapons. They're still very powerful. They're still much more powerful than what was used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But because they're not these multi-megaton bombs, it's considered okay to use them. So Trump is already starting to chip away at the no first use policy. And this is alarming, coming on Donald Trump's decision to simply pull out of the 1987 agreement with the Soviet Union over the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. So Bolton is out there saying, yes, it's going to be a good thing. It's time we got to see a real mushroom cloud instead of watching those movies from the 1950s. Okay. As you know, there is a vast sum of money that goes into the intelligence agencies, all of them, CIA, FBI, NSA. And much of this is black budget money. You, the American public, who are paying for all this, you're not supposed to know how much is being spent on the intelligence community, or where it's going, or what it's paying for, what program. It's all national security. It's all national security. Now, Stephen Aftergood of the Federation of American Scientists Project on Government Secrecy was basically saying that what exactly is going on, it's hard to say. Are there new program leads? Are there new acquisitions? It could be new operations or collection programs. We don't know, and we're not supposed to know. One of the things that we do know is that, at least as far as the NSA is concerned, Israel gets the raw take on every single telephone intercept in this country. There are no filters, meaning they are able to listen to your phone calls, your girlfriend's phone calls, the phone calls of your congressional representatives, the phone calls of your local government, the phone calls of your employers. Whatever they want, they can look at. There's no control whatsoever. You're basically paying the bill for Israel to spy on you, is what's going on here. Over on the economic news, and I hate to say I told you so. Actually, no, I rather enjoy it. But the Bank of England has now refused Venezuela's request to return $550 million in gold. And they're using as an excuse anti-money laundering measures. And saying that, as far as they know, the Venezuelan government just wants to get their hands on the gold, that they want to use it to evade this or that. The reality is the Bank of England probably doesn't have that gold to send back. All of these gold bullion depositories are suspect. And again, going back to America's Book of Secrets, we basically covered that situation where these gold bullion depositories, the New York Federal Reserve, J.P. Morgan, the Bank of France, the Bank of England, have been rehypothecating other people's gold, which is crooked, proves that Jesse James is right. The real outlaws are the bankers. And these gold depositories, they're supposed to work like a safety deposit box at your bank. You go to the bank, you rent a safety deposit box, you're paying rental on it, and you put things into it. Backup discs, passports, your mother's bracelet, your Aunt Mary's top secret chocolate chip cookie recipe, whatever. And then at some point down the road, you are able to go back into the bank, open up that box, and take out exactly the same items that you put in. Unfortunately, as Germany found out, that's not what's going on. When Germany asked to get their gold back, what they were handed were gold bars other than the ones that Germany had put on in there. And it turned out they were less pure. And that's not the way that it's supposed to work. So I remember when I put this story up earlier in the week, when Venezuela wanted their gold returned, and I said, good luck getting it. So the Bank of England is simply saying, no, we are not giving you back your gold. So imagine going to the bank and you go to the safety deposit box vault and the bank employee says, I'm sorry, I can't let you in there. We have new rules. you're not allowed to take back your stuff. You can stand across the room and we'll open the box and you can take a look, and we'll show you stuff that sort of kind of maybe looks like what you put on in there, but you're not allowed to take it out. That's exactly what's going on with the Bank of England. And they're using anti-money laundering laws as an excuse to not give back Venezuela their gold. So for those of you who are listening in Great Britain or the United Kingdom, or who do business with the Bank of England, you might want to rethink that. Now, Iran and South Korea have agreed to direct cross-currency trade. They're dumping the dollar. And this is another indication that South Korea is starting to move away from the United States. So South Korea and Iran, they're using their national currencies and trade exchanges, and this is actually going to strengthen relations between the two countries despite the U.S. sanctions on Iran. I think Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un are in fact moving toward reunification. And they don't care if the United States officially ends the Korean War or not. They're basically taking it apart from inside here. Now, SWIFT, the global transaction processing system, has caved into U.S. pressure. Trump was threatening to sanction them. They're defying the European Union by cutting off all the Iranian banks. And SWIFT is saying this step, while regrettable, has been taken in the interest of the stability and integrity of the wider global financial system, meaning they don't want any more sanctions coming in from the United States. What is going to happen is that Iran is going to start working with one of the alternative systems. That's all that's going to happen. And this is going to lead to more countries also signing on to these alternative systems. In caving into the United States, SWIFT is basically sowing the seeds of its own eventual demise. Alrighty, as far as Iran is concerned, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Trump is allowing Iran to continue to export oil to their 8 largest customers. So he's not going to get his zero oil exports. And Iran, of course, wants to continue exporting oil to other countries as well. And they've hit upon a very simple approach to this because, as you know, modern commercial shipping, they have tracking systems. And there are websites you can go to where you can see where ships are anywhere on the globe. And Iran's ships are basically turning off their trackers. They're turning off their transponders and their satellite links, and it basically makes the ships impossible to track other than by eyeball. Now, I know there are surveillance satellites up there in orbit that are looking straight down, but if they can't see the marks on the side of the hull, or if they can't see what flag is being flown, and how easy would it be for the ship's captains to put up the flag of a different nation while they're in international waters, it's going to be very hard. So it's a low-tech approach, but it's probably going to work here. Now, as you know, Goldman Sachs is finally, after all these years, looking at criminal charges involving the 1MDB probe. And so Goldman is lawyering up. They're hiring the best, most politically connected attorneys for their legal team. Not so that they're going to go into court and do a really bang-up job saying they didn't do it, but so that these politically connected lawyers can go to the parties and talk to other politicians and say, look, let Goldman off. You know, they didn't really mean to do well. Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Coming up here on the top of the hour, and a reminder that, again, hour number 3 is going to be a repeat. We're going to play the interview we did with Layla in Ontario because of her incredible body of knowledge. And I did get a lot of emails about her and what a great guest she was. So we're going to be replaying that. And then after that, please stick around for John Stadmiller. Okay, Elon Musk is out there basically taking a very dim view of artificial intelligence. And he's actually echoing some of the concerns I have, saying that we don't know what they're learning. And some of these AI systems are not behaving very well because we don't know what's going on inside them. And so Elon Musk is out there saying we need to be very careful about where we're going with it and what we allow it to do. And right now, artificial intelligence, it's a buzzword. Everybody loves to use it. Oh, we've got artificial intelligence in here. And I think there's a legitimate concern, and a lot of science fiction writers have mentioned this over the years, about intelligent machines going in directions that are not necessarily in humankind's best interests. And we do need to be careful. Now, Google is admitting their new Pixel 3 has a memory bug that causes it to crash. They're saying a fix is still weeks away. Why are these things not getting fully tested before they're sent to the retailers? That's become a major problem with American manufacturing. Oh, we're going to send stuff out there and it's not working, but don't worry, you've got a guarantee. I don't want a guarantee. I want reliability. That piece of paper, does not reassure me this is a good product. And if you're out there using whatever product that you have bought someplace like out in the wild, having it fail on you is not a good thing. Now, I think a good example of that lax attitude is in this next story because, as you know, recently there was a deadly Boeing 737 MAX 8 crash in Indonesia, and apparently Boeing looked into what was going on and saying that there is a problem, that erroneous readings from the jet's flight monitoring system can cause the planes to abruptly dive. That's going to be a thrill for the passengers and the flight crew, I think. And again, I think there's an issue where flight crews on these aircraft are so dependent on the automated systems. They need more training on just flying stick and rudder, of just turning off that instrument panel and just saying, how do we get this thing on the ground safely? Okay, there's the music. I got to go take Claire to the doctor. Stay tuned for the interview with Layla. Stay tuned after that with John Stadmiller. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. And we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.